Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode of Intentional Wisdom. I'm your host, Greg Campion, and I'm fired up to have with me today Michael Karnjanaprakorn. Michael is a multiple-time founder of technology businesses, including Otis and Skillshare. He's a super impressive guy in the world of business and in a lot of different worlds, but for the purposes of this conversation, he, like me, is a guy in his 40s who is interested in his health and longevity. In this conversation, Michael and I compare notes on all of the efforts that we're undertaking to try to improve our own health and fitness. So we dive in on all the metrics that we're optimizing for, hitting on measures for heart health, cardiovascular fitness, body composition, and more. We touch on nutrition, so much in this conversation. Our goal here really is to use ourselves as examples and to share what the two of us are finding useful in all of these areas. So what metrics we're tracking, what programs we're following, what's working, what's not working, so that hopefully you can find a couple of nuggets in here that you can apply in your own life. I hope you find this conversation as enjoyable as I did. Really, it was a ton of fun. Last thing, just a reminder to head over to gregcampion.substack.com to subscribe to my newsletter, also called Intentional Wisdom. It's one email, it's every other week. It's got all of the best stuff that I'm learning from folks just like Michael. In fact, a couple of days after this episode is released, I'll publish a newsletter all about it. It'll have all the links to everything we talk about, content recommendations on where you can learn more, and where Michael and I are getting all of our own information. So check that out, gregcampion.substack.com. I'd love for you to join that community. All right, enough intro. Here is Michael Karnjanaprakorn. All right, Michael Karnjanaprakorn, welcome to Intentional Wisdom.
Thanks, Greg. I know we've been meaning to do this for a while, so I'm glad we landed on a date and a topic that we're both really excited about.
Yeah, agreed. I'm psyched. What number out of 10 would you give me for the pronunciation of your last name there, would you say?
Like an 8?
8? I'll take it.
Yeah,
Can I hear
fun.
you pronounce it just so I know for future reference?
Yeah. Karnjanaprakorn.
Karnjanaprakorn. Okay, cool. Got it. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I was looking at your YouTube channel yesterday, and I like how you have it sort of like phonetically spelled out in the banner.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get that question all the time, so that's cool that you have that.
I think this will be my first content created that's not business related. So I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
To like broaden what I talk about.
Yes. I actually love talking to people who normally talk about business in all different regards about like what they do personally. I love that little kind of niche because I think, really impressive people have a way to manage all parts of their lives. So I talked to Michael Girdley. You probably know him from Twitter. And, most people want to talk to him about his holding companies and this and that. But he's got like really interesting systems for like how he manages his nutrition and fitness and all this kind of stuff. So that's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good little preview of what we're here to talk about today. So basically, this is the first time that we've spoken. We've kind of traded emails, we've kind of traded Twitter messages over time, but I think you and I basically have a very similar interests in that we are both kind of, kind of armchair experts, so to speak, in all things kind of health and wellness. And that's probably being generous. I think we're both very interested and have gone down rabbit holes on different health and fitness related topics. And so I was thinking like this conversation today could basically be like the two of us kind of nerding out and comparing notes on what we're doing for our own fitness and health as two guys in their 40s who are pretty into this stuff and like talking about like what metrics we're tracking, what we're finding successful, what we're finding not successful, et cetera. So I want to dive into all that with you. But before we get started, I just want to give people some context because you do have an incredibly impressive background. So just tell me a little bit about your kind of life in the business world, and then maybe how that has brought you to this place in the last year or two where you've really, gotten super interested and active around managing your own kind of health and wellness.
Yeah. So I've worked in tech startups my entire career. So for 15 years, most people know me as the founder of Skillshare. And after that, I started a company called Otis. Stepped down from Otis because it got acquired in 2022. And around that same time, I turned 40. So I was looking for a project to do because I was coming off this like marathon sprint working in tech startups. And I kind of treated myself, or I guess my health, as like a project to tackle. So I guess I've been on that journey now. I'm 42 now. And I realized that when I turned 40, I went on the sabbatical and I realized I really deprioritized my health for that entire 15-year sprint. So, I would exercise now and then, but I would eat whatever I wanted, stress eat or skip a meal. And health was just not a huge priority. And I knew always that it should have been. And I guess wanted to play catch up. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the 2 years. I would say that what I'm up to today is creating content and mostly exploring different interest areas outside of just work. Because work was kind of like the huge pillar. It probably, encompassed 70, 80% of, what I thought about or how I spent my time.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's probably like 10, 20%. And
Mm.
I'm filling the other 80% with, other interests.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am today.
Cool. Yeah. So you were kind of on this path of just, working probably crazy hours. I think by any external measures, everyone would look at what you were doing in terms of successfully founding multiple companies, et cetera, as like, wow, this guy has made it. This guy's a real success story. And you definitely were and are. I think what's interesting to me is like, there's a concept of like, we hear all about kind of like life work balance, this and that. And I feel like the reality is, and I'm interested if you agree with this. I think the reality is like, especially in your 20s, even into your 30s, if you're super career focused, like it is probably taking up like 80% of your time. Like I spent the first 12 years of my career on Wall Street in New York and in Boston in super high stress environments. And, it was 90% of my life was that job. And, tons of like late night client dinners, this and that. And like, yes, I kind of similar to you, like, yes, I exercise, but it was not like the top priority by any means. So I'm just kind of curious, was that your experience? Do you feel like that like work-life balance is a fallacy? And then I wonder like, if you think it's almost like depends on age. So like at certain decades in your life,
Oh yeah, I think
maybe it's not even possible, but then at other points in your life, maybe it gets more possible.
I think for most people, I think they kind of live their life in seasons. I think in your 20s and 30s, you're kind of very focused on your career. As far as the percentage, I think it would vary for most people. But if you're like moving to New York or SF, it's probably like 80% plus.
Yeah.
I interviewed Kevin Dahlstrom on my podcast about a month or two ago, and I asked him a similar question. And to give a little bit of context, he's probably in his mid to late 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the lines that really resonated with me was that work as you get older becomes a smaller and smaller percentage of your interest or even your identity. So
Mm-hmm.
in his 50s, he says work is like 10% of his identity now. I mean, he's still working, but it got filled, the rest of that time got filled with so many other things. And, he was pretty successful in his career too. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong within your 20s to have a career season. But maybe when you're, going into your 30s to balance it out a little bit, maybe it's 70-30, adding in maybe dating or health or whatever you want. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just knowing that if you're going 100%, you're going to burn out at some point. So I would definitely wouldn't recommend that for a long period of time. Maybe you go 100% if you're trying to launch a company or raising capital or, at these like critical moments if you're starting a company or launching one or running one. But definitely wouldn't recommend 100%. So I think if you're really like motivated and you're really wanting to be successful, I think most people wouldn't really have the best work-life balance. I think it's really hard for people that are very ambitious from what I've observed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think like most of the people that I tend to talk to on this podcast, I usually are talking to more like people who are like sort of middle-aged, 40s type of point in life, and that's honestly a lot of my audience for the podcast and newsletter. And so I think by the time you get to this age, you're in your 40s, I think you become aware that if you're not taking care of your body, like stuff is starting to break down, and you're just starting to see the difference between people starting to age like at different rates. And like I look at people that I went to high school with now, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. Like you can tell like who's the like ultra marathon runner and who's the like complete opposite, right? And
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
and I think it only accelerates kind of from here.
Yeah, for sure.
But by the way, that podcast you just mentioned, we can link to that in the notes. I saw Ali Abdul, the kind of really well-known YouTuber, kind of clipped that and did a little video of his own on that. So that must have been cool to get it picked up
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
Yeah, he did a whole video on that interview, and he pulled out one aspect around designing your end state lifestyle, which Kevin recommends is like the first, like anytime anyone younger than asks for advice, that's usually his first answer is like, why don't you design what your ideal lifestyle looks like? So it could be living in 2 cities, it could be running a marathon every year, having 2 dogs. It's whatever you want it to be,
Yep,
but just
yep.
being very specific and clear on what that is. So Ali Abdal pulled that out, did a whole video on it, and just sent a bunch of traffic to my very small page. I think I had
You
like
know what?
500,
Well,
500 subscribers at that point, and now I have, I think, over 3,000.
I know that I was looking at this yesterday, and I saw when he shows it in the video, it's like, I found this on an obscure YouTube channel and it's like 500 subscribers. Then I went and looked at it yesterday. It was like 3,800. I was like,
Yeah.
well, he helped it be a little
Yeah.
less obscure. So that's cool.
Yeah, the funny thing is like all the comments were like, Ollie, you're such a kind YouTuber to shout out this really teeny tiny YouTube channel that no one's ever heard of.
Nice. Well, that's cool. I think it's a good testament though. You put out good quality ideas and content out into the world, and people start to notice. So that's awesome. All right, cool. So let's talk. Let's get into the health stuff, and let's start to nerd out a little bit here on all this stuff and get into some of the metrics. So you go and you start this sabbatical 2 years or so ago, and you start getting more interested in your health, and you kind of realize, okay, maybe I haven't been taking care of myself quite as much as I want to be. And so where do you even start, and what kind of becomes a priority?
Yeah, so I set what I called the decade goal. So at the time I was 40, and I said, I want my biological age to be 30, and I want my mental age to be 50. So a decade younger and a decade wiser. If I had to add another one, I think there's like a fitness age now. So what I realized with the biological age, you get all your blood markers, and they can kind of extrapolate from your health what your age would be. And then I think there's like a fitness age that I don't even know what that means. I just saw it on, I think, Garmin or something. So
I feel like some of these trackers have something
yeah.
like that. I wear Whoop and Apple Watch, and they don't have that, but I think I've seen some people like posting stuff.
Yeah, so I would have maybe added that as well, because I realized that my biological age was really young. I think it was like 26 or 27, but my fitness age was kind of where I was, because I wasn't really doing any cardio or anything like that, which I realized has a huge correlation from what I've researched to longevity. And I would definitely say, I wouldn't even say I'm like a novice. I would say I'm a 80-20 researcher. So I just look for the 20% that I can do that gets me 80% of the way there, and then I just kind of ignore the rest. Like I'm not
Pareto principle in action.
Yeah, I'm not like listening to endless podcasts or reading research papers. That I feel like there are other things I would rather do with my time.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I approached it. The first thing I did was I signed up for a longevity clinic, and they kind of run you through these. It's called Bionic Health. It's based out of where I live in North Carolina. So I started dialing in my biomarkers. So they run you through these modules, but the first thing they do is they're like, okay, let's just get a base assessment. And that's when I got like hit in the face or hit in the nose with some of the things that came back, which I did not even realize.
Okay. Well, tell me, what are some of the things that they're measuring or looking at?
Some of the things are just like some biomarkers are a little off. My testosterone was fairly low. But the biggest one was I have very high risk for heart disease. And that was like a huge shock to me because I felt pretty healthy. Maybe a month or two right before that, I went to my general practitioner, like my regular doctor, and she
Yep.
did our annual exam, and she's like, "You're super healthy. You have nothing to worry about." And then I got these biomarkers on, and it came back that I have very high cholesterol. Was kind of borderline at the point, but I scored, I think, in the 90th or 95th percentile for lipoprotein A, which is genetic and has a high correlation with like heart disease. And what the doctor at the longevity clinic also told me is like, there's no medicine for it. So I was like, oh, this sucks.
Mm.
So it's genetic, which means like no amount of diet or nutrition is going to really move that number or any of my cholesterol numbers. And there's no cure for it. Well, what am I supposed to do? So that's when I was like, okay, this isn't just, eat healthy. This is like a huge wake up call because I realized that my dad had heart disease and his dad. So I kind of mentioned my family history to my that doctor. And he was like, yeah, your dad probably had it and his dad probably had it. And if we could go all the way back further and further, I'm pretty sure that almost everyone on that genetic line probably had high lipoprotein A. So.
Okay. So this is, I think what they call LP(a) for short. So, you and I think, have both probably read Peter Attia's book, Outlive.
Yep.
I knew we were going to be talking about some of this heart related stuff today. So I just reread the chapter in that called The Ticker, which to me is probably the fifth or sixth time I've read that. And it influenced a lot of how I think about heart health. One of the things he says in there is that when he looks at someone's panel, the first two things he looks at are ApoB, which is basically another way to measure cholesterol, and LP(a), which is, as you say, genetic, and it is something that you either have high levels or you don't. It's not sort of like it's like you either have this high risk factor or you don't have this high risk factor. So I think just looking at some of the numbers, so when I looked at the healthcare system, whatever, where they want you to be under 75 on LP(a). I got mine tested. It was like 11. And so it was, okay, I'm grateful. That's apparently not a big issue for me. Do you remember what your number was when you got that?
Yeah, I have it written down here as 124.6
Okay.
NMOL.
Okay. So what was
Yeah.
your like reaction as soon as you saw that?
I think I went through like all the different like emotions. I think first I was kind of like depressed because at the same time my dad was having some health issues. So I then kind of understood that why that was happening and then also linking it to myself. So just kind of, extrapolating out 30 something years, seeing like what my trajectory would be if I didn't do anything. Then denial, where I just kind of ignored it. And maybe like a month or two, or maybe 3 months after that, it's like, okay, let me figure out what to do now.
Yep.
So I would say maybe the first 3 months I didn't do anything. I was just mad, sad, avoided it. And then, the doctor would keep following up with me. He's like, hey, here's what I would recommend. So he made his recommendation. I just kind of like maybe sat with it for another 3 months, or maybe 6. I don't know. It was a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
And I talked to a lot of people because I'm a very like, I don't take medicine guy. Right. I don't even, I don't really get headaches, but I don't take Tylenol or I don't really take medicine. And my mentality changed where there's certain medicines that are probably good for you. Where you don't have to take them all the time, you don't have to take a lot, but if there's certain things that really reduce your risk, maybe you should consider it. So that was like a big mental shift for me. And knowing that I was also looking for someone to give me the answer of what to do. So I would keep, asking my doctor. Then I met like a different cardiologist. I met with my general practitioner. I asked them, they all gave me different approaches, some overlap. And then I realized at the end of the day, like I have to take ownership over my own health and take the information I have, come with my own independent thinking on it, and then make a decision. Because nobody is going to want to make a decision for your health. They make a strong recommendation. But I kept pushing for someone to give me that silver bullet, and they're like, I'll tell you what we think or what I think, but I'm not going to tell you what you should do specifically. So I kind of did my own research and then started coming up with like my own treatment plan.
Okay, so I want to talk about that, but before we do, so give me a sense for what were the cholesterol numbers? What were you looking at in association with that? Because that's almost like, I want to talk about what you're doing on the LP(a) side, because that's one thing, but that's probably, I don't know. Do you know what percent of the population has elevated LP(a)? It's probably like
20 to 30. Yeah.
Oh, is that high?
It's pretty high. It's 20-30%. I think maybe 5 or 10 years ago, maybe 5. And there was a New York Times article that came out that was kind of like, it was always talked about in the health community, but I think that New York Times article is what kind of brought it to more mainstream.
Yep.
And then I think Peter Attia also hit the rise of his like content over the past few years has also brought it front and center.
Yep.
So from all the doctors I talked to, it wasn't like a pushback on that. They're like, oh yeah, LPA, LP(a) and ApoB, we can test for that, but it's not something that we test for normally. But if you want to get it done, we can get it done. So, but from that article and from my research, it was about 20 to 30%. Out of that, most people don't know they have it because you don't really see any symptoms, because heart disease, from what I've learned, is like this very slow, gradual process that happens over decades.
Yes.
And most people that have high scores of LPA or even cholesterol, like they find out that they have this when they get a heart attack or a stroke.
Yep.
So that's usually when most people find out. So
exactly.
Peter Attia has been doing,
says it in the book. He's like, yes, often the first sign of heart disease is sudden death. Right. Like,
yeah. So that's, I think it's being tested a lot more. So my cholesterol numbers were 200 for total, 201.
Total.
Which was like borderline high.
Yeah.
And I tried everything, right? So I
okay.
dialed in my diet. I got healthier, and nothing would move that number over years. It was
that
just
was total. You're talking about total cholesterol.
Total cholesterol.
Total cholesterol. Okay. What about LDL? Do you have that?
LDL is 129, which is high.
Okay.
Yeah, HDL was 61 and VLD was 11. So those are like good or normal. But I had, because my LDL, which they call like bad cholesterol, was pretty high. That's why my total was very high. And my ApoB was at 93, which is also really high.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So just so people know, like, I think I mentioned, like, ApoB is another way to measure cholesterol, essentially. And it is, I'm not going to get into the science here because I won't claim that I really understand the nuance of the science, but my understanding is that it's more predictive of heart disease than looking at LDL or some of the other measures. And it's a measure of concentration of cholesterol within LDL particles. So again, what I would actually point everyone to Peter Attia's Outlive. He does a really nice job of kind of explaining the science here. But so ApoB, so I think so you mentioned you had to ask for these two tests, ApoB and LP(a) specifically. I had to do the same thing, and it wasn't a big deal. I don't remember. I think there was like a little extra cost. I think it was like $20 extra on top of like a normal lipid panel to get these two things tested. But in terms of the numbers, so I think basically your doctor will recommend an ApoB number below 90. And just for reference, they usually recommend below 100 on LDL cholesterol. Attia, whether or not you're a disciple of Attia, recommends like pretty drastically lower numbers. And his whole philosophy is basically what you're outlining here, just saying that heart disease is something that accumulates over time, over many decades, and the whole game is to keep these numbers as low as possible for as long as possible. So Attia, in some cases through drug intervention, maybe even necessary to get to these numbers, but he recommends ApoB as under 30 and LDL kind of under 20 or 30. Like those are really aggressively low numbers. And I think you almost can't get there without medication.
Yeah, I think he mentions that it's very difficult to get to those numbers without medication.
Yeah. Yeah. So what have you tried and what have you learned? And I'm curious, like, I guess both on the medicine side of things and anything else you're doing in terms of diet or lifestyle to help improve this.
So what most people do when they go on medicine is most people, I would say majority, will go on a statin. And there's like a trend for younger people going on it. I've had friends that are in their like 30s that are on a statin. And there are side effects with like, sore muscles and, you can kind of research it yourself, but the idea is to keep your cholesterol low as early as possible. And the challenge with me, because I would say I'm part of that 20 to 30 with LP(a) with very high scores in the like 95th percentile, is that statins lower your cholesterol, but it doesn't have any effect on LP(a). So what the longevity doctor recommended was just to skip the statins. He was like, look, you can go on it, but it's really not going to move that number. That's for you, the most critical number. The plan is we hope in the next decade that there are a lot of drugs in trial that can knock out your lipoprotein A by like 98, 99% and just lower that score pretty much to zero or close to zero. It's going to just knock it out. There's a lot of drugs that are coming out. It just needs to get approved. In the meantime, let's get you on something else just to manage the risks. And what they recommended was an inhibitor called PCSK9, which is also what Peter Tia recommends as well.
I think he's got that in the end of the chapter. Yep.
So I think he recommended that with a combination of something else, which I can't remember. I think he might even recommend a statin with it. I don't remember, but I didn't want to mix two different drugs with two different side effects, and I wanted to do one at a time. So I decided to go on the inhibitor. The con with that, I've had zero side effects with it, but the biggest con is it's really expensive and insurance doesn't cover it unless you go through all the statins and your body just doesn't accept them. So I decided to just pay out of pocket.
So insurance is not totally recognizing that.
I think it is, but you have to, from what my doctor told me, is like you have to fail all the statins. And there's a lot of statins, or I don't know if it's one or all the ones they would recommend or the major ones, but I decided to just skip that because my mentality is like, I don't really spend money on a lot of things, but in my head, I have like unlimited for health, right? So that goes that saying that Naval kind of popularized, like a healthy man or human wants an unlimited amount of things, but a sick man only wants one thing, which is to be healthy. So I was like, look, let's just like front load it here. I took it and the results were pretty like good. So I took it, and what it is, I'm going to butcher this. I kind of copy and pasted it from like ChatGPT. It's a new type of medication that can lower LDL cholesterol by about 50% and reduce LP(a) by 20 to 30%. It works by blocking the action of PCSK9, which is a protein that reduces the liver's ability to remove LDL cholesterol from the blood.
Okay.
And by doing that, it increases LDL cholesterol removal, and it's often prescribed when statins alone are insufficient. So I was like, hey, it's going to lower my cholesterol and it could reduce my LP(a). Let's go for it. So I went on it for the first 3 months, and all my metrics dropped except for LP(a). So total cholesterol dropped from 201 to 145. LDL dropped from 129 to 63. So essentially it got cut in half.
Wow.
My ApoB got cut in half from 93 to 47.
Wow.
My LPA was relatively the same. So it didn't really move, but the doctor was like, it takes about 3 months for your LP(a) to move. So let's retest in 3 months. I'm in the process of getting retested now. And during that time, I didn't change anything with my fitness. So this was just like, this is over the summer when we're on vacation. I was kind of, I weigh the most that I've ever weighed right now. So I was like fat boy Mike, we were traveling. I was like, if I want to eat the steak, I'm going to eat the steak. If I want the pasta, I'm going to eat the pasta. And now I think if I, dialed in my nutrition, dialed in my exercise, I think the numbers will probably stay there or go even lower. The only thing that kind of sucks is that I have to get an injection like every 2 weeks. So my
Mm.
wife kind of just, it's really easy. It takes like 30 seconds, but
So you can do it at home. You don't have to
you
go
could do it at
have
home.
it.
You could like
Okay.
inject yourself in the thigh or the
Yep.
arm or something. So
Hmm.
sucks as, have to do that every 2 weeks for the rest of my life. But
Well, maybe. I mean, you mentioned that there's all these drugs that are in development as well. So maybe the next thing that comes out is easier to
yeah,
administer, maybe cheaper at some point
yeah,
as
my
well.
hope is that it comes out within the next 5 years, if not
Okay.
sooner.
Yeah.
Um,
Could you be part of a trial or something like that if
I
you?
submitted my name to
Yeah.
be part of a trial because I think my local hospital here is doing the trials, but they haven't contacted me back. But
Mm.
I'm kind of happy with kind of the results I'm seeing here.
Yep.
I think I feel like by the time I turn, let's say, my mid to late 40s and it doesn't feel like it's coming around the corner, then I might get a little
Yep.
bit more aggressive at trying to get on a trial or find some other treatment levels. But I was pretty happy with these numbers because that's the first time that my cholesterol actually dropped.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, I haven't been, well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say I haven't been monitoring my cholesterol that closely, but I've got this spreadsheet. It's right in front of me. I'll actually share the link to this in the show notes where I think I shared a version of this with you. It's like super simple. It's literally just one table in
Yeah.
a Google spreadsheet.
I actually looked at yours and created a similar one based on yours because I was like, hey, here
Okay,
you did
you're
all
a
the.
tech guy, so you probably have a super badass one.
No,
So
no. I
maybe
was
we can
like,
get yours to share.
no, mine's as simple as I was like, he did all the
Okay.
research for what to track. Let me just copy his.
Okay. So I have in mind just like some of these things that we've mentioned and like what some of the healthcare recommended, what other people like
Yep.
Atia are recommending, stuff like that. I'm going to continue to add to this over time, and I keep this public because my whole thing is like I'd like to keep it public and have somebody stumble into it and be like, hey, dude, like I noticed your such and such number is off. Like you're gonna die, like if you don't do this, So maybe there's some benefits of open sourcing it. But anyways, long story short, so my LDL cholesterol I've only had the ApoB measured once or twice, so I don't feel like I have good data there yet. And
What was yours at?
so when I first had it measured, the ApoB was 74. And so like the healthcare system, like I said, recommends under 90. So that was last June. Okay. But then I got on this kick of going super high fat. And I was like not afraid of it was like not totally keto, but like heavy cream and everything and just like very liberal with all of that stuff. And I think that that's what caused it to then spike because I got it measured again in last December and it was 109. And I was like, oh, shoot. And my LDL over that time started at 90, went to 138. And then that was when I was like, okay, no more. I think the heavy cream and stuff like that is I'm going over the top with this stuff. So I need to make some diet adjustments. Since then, I made those diet adjustments. The LDL came back to 90, but I haven't had the ApoB retested because I'm only on pace to get that tested once a year. Maybe I should have it more.
What were the diet changes that you made?
It was probably taking some of the higher fat stuff out of my diet, I would say. So it was probably dialing back a little bit on red meat, dialing back a little bit on things like heavy cream, maybe dialing back a little bit on eggs, but not really. I don't.
Yeah.
I do like eggs, and I'm not super worried about eggs. We can talk about nutrition because I'm thinking about like, have you heard or read any of Dr. Casey Means stuff yet? Okay,
What's the title?
Good Energy is the book.
No, I haven't.
Okay, she's been making the rounds on a bunch of podcasts recently, but she's like a Stanford educated physician and anyways, like long story short, she's super impressive background, and she's basically saying like processed food is the root of all metabolic disorder. And so I've been doing an audit of my own diet and like realizing that I'm getting the macros right. Like I'm going super high protein. Like I'm following all the advice I'm hearing, which is like 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So I'm getting like 175 grams of protein a day. So like I'm getting like the macros right, I feel like, but I think I'm getting the micronutrients wrong. And so basically I'm eating too many like protein bars and protein shakes, stuff that has like long lists of ingredients. And her whole thing is like all this stuff is not like that hard to figure out. Like all this metabolic disease, which manifests itself in about every disease you can imagine, is like from physical health to mental health, everything else is related to something breaking down at the cellular level. And that there's a direct line from putting stuff that's unnatural chemicals in our body to our cells not reacting to it. And then it's broader than that. There's environmental stuff and microplastics and this and that. But really, I think go back to your kind of thought at the beginning of this conversation in terms of like 80-20, like 80-20, like the 20% that's going to drop, I think that I'm looking at right now in my own diet is like, can I get rid of almost everything that's processed? Like I probably can't get rid of everything that's processed. I know I can't, if I'm going to live like a realistic lifestyle, but can I get rid of most of it? So that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, I kind of came to the same conclusion as well. Um, there was that whole trend where it was like eat as much protein and you could, as long as you're underneath a certain calorie limit, you can eat whatever you want because that's
Yep.
more sustainable.
Yep.
And then I think the quality of that diet isn't great. And I don't think it is that sustainable. So maybe you do lose body fat, but if you cross-reference that from a longevity standpoint, if you're eating a lot of processed foods, then that can't be healthy for the long run. So
No, I agree.
I kind of switch. I would say this is very recent. So it's
Yep.
been 2 weeks into it. So coming out of the summer, I weighed the most I've ever weighed. I was like, man, I really need to like not, if I did my biomarkers and I worked on heart, then I was like, should I work on fitness or testosterone next? And I was like, I'm not really that interested in testosterone because my numbers are kind of gone back up into a more average baseline. And I was like, I don't really feel the need to increase it anymore with any medicine. So I went down to fitness and nutrition. So what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks, and maybe we could do like a update in 6 months to see if it's sustainable, was I read Rich Roll's book and then listened to a few of his podcasts on like a plant-based diet. I don't think and my wife is a vegetarian. So I kind of switched my diet and it's been trending towards that. It's like 80% vegetables and plants, which by nature is like whole foods.
Excellent. Yeah,
and maybe slightly processed. And then 20%, if we go out to eat, that's when I'll like eat meat. It's like, I'm not going to cook this in our house, but if we go out to eat and I can order a burger or steak and it's a cheat meal. And that mix has been working really well. I've noticed that like my appetite has changed for what I'm craving. Like I opened up the fridge the other day and there's like a kale salad. Never in my life. I was like, man, that looks really good.
Really?
Like,
Okay.
it looks so nutritious and like, I don't know, it just looked really good. And never in my life would I have looked at a salad and like craved it. I would have looked, grabbed a cracker or cheese, like my kid's cheese stick, stuff like something like that.
Yeah.
Snack on. So,
well, that's interesting. I've never attempted to go plant-based. I'm a big Rich Roll fan. His book, what is it? Finding Ultra, I think it's called, is awesome. Yeah. But I'm a big fan of his podcast as well. I know he's way down that rabbit hole in terms of plant-based. I actually have his cookbook, like plant-based cookbook, but it probably has collected more dust and gotten more.
Yeah. So I would say I'm approaching like plant-based light. I'm not super vegan. It's just
Pareto principle again.
It's like what's the most simple thing is like just eat more vegetables. So like sweet potatoes or corn, or basically I just go to the vegetables aisle and just get as many vegetables and then find an easy recipe to meal prep for the week and then just knock it out. So trying to like buy less things that come in the middle aisles from boxes essentially.
Yes.
And
100%.
even trying to shift our kids palate into that direction too. So I'm noticing that she was like, really resistant, and now, eating a pepper, like a stuffed pepper, which I don't think she would have eaten like a month
Hmm.
ago. So
That is I don't want to switch you on to your next business idea, but that is the $1 billion idea if you can get kids to
dude,
eat healthy because so I'm probably going to be writing more, and maybe I'll get this Dr. Casey Means on my podcast because I'm about to go down that rabbit hole like personally. So I'll probably
you need to.
yeah,
It's crazy. Like if you go out to eat to a restaurant, the kids menu is always the same. It's always chicken fingers,
yep,
cheeseburger, grilled
yep,
cheese, I don't know, like some other
yeah,
unhealthy
hot
thing.
dog or French
Yeah, it's
fries,
like,
whatever.
like a
Yeah,
gross hot dog.
yeah.
Yeah, so what we've been doing is like ordering from the sides menu.
Oh yeah.
So like roasted sweet potatoes or roasted carrots. So
Mm-hmm.
we um rarely order from the kids menu now.
Yep.
And
Yep. That's a
but
good
it's
call.
just kind of insane to like the default is because they're kids, they should be eating food like this. Like, but who made that up? Like,
Yeah,
why is that?
I know.
Um,
It is really, I think that's a place where like there needs to be a shift in the culture. And it's really, really hard as a parent to try to navigate that because you're basically up against society in the way that everything is set
yeah,
up. And like I look at my three kids, I gave them all cereal this morning and I'm like, this is processed crap
yeah,
that they're
yeah.
putting in their bodies. But like I don't, everybody, they all have their own unique taste. They don't like this. If I would make them eggs, they probably none of them would eat it. Like, the battle. So that's why I think that's the $1 billion idea. Like, if you can really take all this idea of like more healthy natural foods and get the kids to eat them, I have not been successful in that, if I'm honest. And I think that the only saving grace I have in term in recently listening to what this Dr. Casey Means is saying about all this stuff is that you can heal your body like pretty quickly, like even within like a few weeks time by like getting rid of all the crap and like ingesting like real nutrient dense food that comes from the earth. You can heal your body. So like, that's the only thing I'm hanging my hat on is like, okay, my kids are not like, this is not permanent. Like they can, and I think like leading by example is a good thing. And like
I
when they
think
get in their
that sounds
teenage
right. And
years, they start making their own decisions and
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah.
the other thing I was thinking about related to that, and I was like, okay, what are the foods that I crave? Like, what's my comfort food? It's like the food that I binged on when I was a kid,
Mm.
um, like Doritos. Like I would just crush a whole bag when
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like
Oh,
a kid. Yeah.
100%. Everything. Dude. I was
So
crushing Oreos. I
yeah,
was crushing Twinkies.
yeah.
I mean,
Every time I'm like in a gas station, I'm like,
yeah.
look at the bag of Doritos, like, oh, that looks so good.
Oh, yeah. So that's another thing though too, because it's like I think about all the things that I ingested as a kid. I'm like, okay, maybe these guys are,
Yeah.
you
So maybe the next generation, they'll like love carrots.
know,
Like that's their
maybe,
comfort food when they're
maybe.
older. They're like, oh, I really would love that kale salad. That
Now,
would
are
hit the
you
spot.
are you tracking calories or anything like that, or do you use
I go
any?
off and on. I think
Yeah.
right now I am.
So what do you use to do that?
I think it's just like a really archaic app called Lose It.
Okay.
It just
Okay.
works really well. It's just super simple. It's the one I've been using. It's like the Evernote of
Oh yeah.
nutrition
Okay.
tracking.
Okay.
Like it's just like works and it's solid and I've used it. I know a lot of other people use Macro Factor. Is that what it's called?
A lot of people use MyFitnessPal.
Yeah,
That's a
that's right. That's
popular
probably the
one.
Evernote.
Yeah. I use one called I think it's called Carb Manager. For whatever reason, I just started using this one, and it's pretty good. Like, and I'm kind of on and off too. Like in the last 2 months, I've been really on, and I would say I probably tracked something like 75 or 80% of the days over the last couple of months. And I play around with like the different macros. So I'm like, let me hold it up to the camera here. So it's
Oh,
like, this
cool.
is kind of what it looks like. You can see like,
Yeah.
so that was like yesterday. I don't know if that's in focus or not, but basically like you put in like what you want to target for total calories, and then macros, which is carbs, protein, and fat. So like, let me give you just some numbers. So like, I am like 6'1". I weigh 175 pounds. I am targeting here to eat 2,190 calories a day. By the way, this is like, not an exact science, but that's what it is, because when I did the numbers, that's what it equated to. So that's breaks down as follows: 125 grams of carbs, 175 grams of protein, 110 grams of fat. And I mess around with those, the balances of those macros, and I see what happens to my body. I think there's an element of this that is maybe somewhat individual. Different people's bodies react different ways. My body has always reacted to lower carb. Like, that's for me traditionally been the way to lose weight, like lower carb. So anyways, that's what I'm doing right now. So that's one side of the equation, which is what you're taking in. The other side is, what you're putting out there. And so I don't know how accurate this is, but I wear a Whoop, and Whoop has a calories burned metric. And over the last month, I've averaged burning about 2,300 calories a day. Now, some people, I don't know, that may sound like a lot. Some people, that may sound like nothing. I don't know, but that's what it is for me. So based on what I have in my carb manager, I have myself at a slight caloric deficit. I'm trying to improve my body composition, meaning mainly, lose fat and gain muscle. But I have a slight priority for the loose fat because my body naturally wants to have love handles, and I don't want them. So anyways, that's how I'm doing it. How do you think about it all?
Yeah. So if we look at the decade goal, I felt like getting it closer to 30, the biomarkers, I identified one of my 4 horsemen, which was heart disease, have a plan. Then it's okay, let's focus on broader fitness. So I was starting to do strength training since COVID started. And I was like, okay, let me get into cardiovascular. So I tried a bunch of different sports. Golf, I think that was like a huge thing during COVID.
Yep.
Not for me, it was a very hard sport to pick up at 40.
Yep.
My
it's
body
hard to pick up for sure. Yeah.
It's hard to pick up, but
yep.
Tried martial arts because I'm really into mixed martial arts, but also not a sport to pick up in your 40. Like I was always getting injured. I was like, okay, my number one goal is to exercise, but not get injured. And like everything that I've done since, during the sabbatical, it always traces back to like what I was interested in as a kid. I ran track and cross country. I've been running since I was like 14 or 15. So I got back into running.
Cool.
And I kind of like started following, I guess, what Nick Bare has popularized, which is a hybrid athlete. So I really do enjoy strength training and getting stronger, but just doing that by itself is like super boring. It kind of started getting back into running. So it's pretty good because like the way my personality is like I need like a milestone or an event that I could work backwards from that is a forcing mechanism for me to get really disciplined. So I signed up for a half marathon race.
Nice.
And that's where the nutrition kind of slid in and my schedule kind of slid into that. Pretty much my entire schedule now is like very, very straightforward. And I just kind of followed that plan. So I would say at a high level, because I'm 42 and I don't want to get injured. And I was coming off a double calf strain in March. So I tried to get into running at the beginning of the year. Like everyone, went too hard. Was running like I was running. I was like 15. And at 41, my legs just gave out. So I got 2 calf strains. It took 3 months for the left one to recover and like 6 for the right one. So like, I don't want to deal with that again. I understand that I'm going to get injured. Running is pretty hard on your body.
Yep.
So I picked up zone 2 running because everything that I'm doing right now is like I guess checked with longevity. So there's a lot of benefits for zone 2 running. So I followed this method called the Maffetone method, which is basically you take 180 minus your age, and that's relatively the heart rate you want to run at or lower. So for me, it was 138. It has a lot of benefits. It improves your cardiovascular health, strengthens your heart. You're mostly utilizing fat to run. has a bunch of other benefits, but the biggest one was it helps kind of like widen your arteries, so improves blood flow. So it
Mm,
kind of, in a way, can reverse heart disease. And that's probably not the
mm,
right explanation of it, but that was like a big selling point for me.
mm.
So I signed up for this race, and then I'm starting to see like a lot of my aerobic and cardiovascular stats, which I know we want to go over, like VO2 max and HRV and body fat percentage. So
Mm.
for me, it was um, putting that hat on. So of just being a runner again and like embracing it. And after my interview with Kevin, he's obsessed with climbing. And I was like, I'm
Yeah.
not really obsessed with anything right now. So, and I would say since I've gotten back into running, like
Mhm.
super obsessed, like watching YouTube videos of running shoes, like tracking all my metrics and trying to improve
Mm.
my, running cadence and my running form. So it's just,
Cool.
and signing up for or joining a running club, meeting a bunch of other people. So all the things he kind of mentioned, I was like, oh, I think I found that for myself.
Awesome.
And all I
Yeah.
had to do is go back to what I was like super interested in. Like, what's the one thing I've been interested in from sports my entire life?
Mhm.
It's like martial arts and running. I can't do martial arts, so let's go back to running. So that's
Okay.
kind of where I've been.
I like it. I like it. Um, my experience has paralleled that a lot. I've gone, I think last year in 2023, I went way down the zone 2 rabbit hole, got really into that, started running again for the first time in probably 10 years. I had like some back situation like 10 years ago where I had like sciatica or something. And so basically I was like, oh, it's the pounding of the running. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm done running. And I was never huge, but I ran like one half marathon. I ran like a bunch of like, whatever, 10Ks and stuff like that. And did this cross country and track in high school.
Oh,
Was
awesome.
not super good at it, to be
Yeah.
honest with you, but I did it. Um, but so for me recently, I started to get back into it in 2023. Ran a couple of 5Ks and something I could do with my kids because my kids are at the age
Yeah.
now where they can start to get into that sort of thing. And so my daughter did this like girls on the run thing, and so I ran a girls on the run 5K with her, and that was cool. But I've been getting there too. So you mentioned VO2 max. So I had my VO2 max measured. Let's see, at the very end of last year, and I was kind of disappointed in the results. It was like my VO2 max was, and by the way, if anyone wants to do this, like you can go get it done for like a couple $100. Your Apple Watch, whatever what you wear, will give you like a proxy of it. I found that my Apple Watch was not super accurate.
No, it's
Apple Watch
not.
was
Yeah.
my Apple Watch was overestimating how in shape I was. Unfortunately, it wasn't. It didn't miss the other way. But I got my VO2 max measured, and it was 34.5. And just to give people context, basically that was like, let me see if I can pull up a chart here. Yes, so that was in the poor category. Okay, so poor, like not even fair or good. It was poor. And so I was like, what the heck? I thought I was in shape. I work out, whatever. It was not good. And so I think my experience so far is that that's like a little bit more like turning a barge, trying to get that to improve. The good news is whether it's accurate or not, like I get it measured again halfway through this year. It was 36. I'm continuing to try to improve that with running, actually specifically. And so I'm totally with you on the get in shape, but don't get injured. And so on the running, I'm doing it like kind of cautiously, but like one of the things I talked to my doctor about, I was like, what the hell? Like I do like Peloton rides all the time. I work out all the time. Why is my VO2 max shape? Why is my VO2 max suck? And he's like, go for a run. I'm like, okay. And then I started running and I was like, yeah, this is harder than
Yeah.
Peloton ride. And anyways, long story short, I actually just spent way too much money ordering the Peloton treadmill, which is going to show up at my house on Monday. So I'm about to take it to another level there. But one other thing I'll just mention for people who maybe are a little more concerned around the joints and all that kind of stuff, don't feel like they can run. I have been doing a lot of zone 2 recently on a treadmill incline. So jack it up to like one of the highest incline levels it goes and walk hard for like 45 minutes. And I can get my heart rate firmly in zone 2, and it's easier on the joints. So I'll just mention that for folks.
Yeah. Some of the things I've been doing to like, so I've gotten my mileage up higher than it's been in a few years without re-injuring my calves. So obviously there's a lot of things you do, but the few things I've done that have worked is changing my running form. So when I went to physical therapy for both my calf strains, they were mentioning that I was going up and down. So I think for a lot of us that have, computer jobs, we're going to have really weak glutes and really tight calves because we're kind of sitting at a desk all day. So when we go running, those muscles are just not firing off the way they're supposed to. So then we overcompensate by, changing our running form or whatever. And so that's how I originally got injured. So I've been working on strengthening my glutes and getting more ankle mobility. So that's what I'm kind of doing from a physical therapy standpoint. But next to
How are
that
you
is
strengthening your glutes? What, any exercises?
like squats, deadlifts.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
all those like running, runner strength things you find on YouTube.
Yep.
The things that really helped from a running form standpoint, the one thing I've been focused on is outside of bopping up and down is just improving my steps per minute. So they say like runners should have like 180 cadence. It just as a rule of thumb. I'm 6 foot, so I have a pretty long stride. So but my cadence was like 140, which basically means that I'm putting a lot of weight, 180, I'm 188 now, like 188 pounds, like, just pounding on it. But if you shorten your stride a little bit and you increase your steps per minute, it kind of forces you to not overstride, which is the heel strike, which is what causes, and for me, a lot of the issues. So combining zone 2 with the Maffetone method with, now I'm at like 165, 170 steps per minute. And like, I feel great after a run. So I'm not super sore. And then the second thing is I've been focusing a lot on recovery. So when I was younger, go for a run, don't stretch, don't warm up, don't even care about the next day, go hit it with another hard workout. I've been doing a lot of recovery. So make sure I'm getting the right sleep, foam rolling, getting a massage like on the legs like every other week, and just spending a lot of time on recovery. Because now that I'm 42, it's like the body just needs more time to, I guess, decompress to get back to, it's like, ready to go shape. And then the mentality that I have now is like, I'm like pushing myself hard, but I'm not willing to push myself so hard that I risk injury. So if I'm running fast, which is about like once every other week right now, which is really hard for me to not do more than that. Like I want to do more than that. So it's like, I'm looking forward to my interval run on Tuesday because it's every other week. Because I'm not trying
How many times a week are you running?
I'm doing 3 times a week. It's increasing to 4. And once every other week, I'm doing like a speed workout.
Okay.
Which is the most risk. It's like for what I'm training, it's like the safest because it's those fast workouts that lead to injury because your form might change a little bit. So yeah, that's kind of the I guess what I'm doing to like prevent that injury. So I'm getting like little nicks in here, and I realized I was wearing the wrong running shoes. So like it's just a lot of little adjustments, but I would love to be able to run year round for like the next decade. That's kind of like my goal. And obviously I'm gonna get injured here and there, but not to the point where my calves knock me out for like 3 or 6 months. That would be disastrous.
Right. Yeah, I think that's half the battle in middle age is being super smart and around how can you avoid the injury. Yeah. So I mean, for me, I'm kind of settling into this. I'm not training for a race right now. Actually, I am probably going to sign up for something with one of my kids in the next month or two. But I run I'm running like twice a week right now, and like once will just be like a short run, like lunchtime on a treadmill, just run 2 miles, get the heart rate up there, and that's about it. And then I'll go for a longer run on the weekend. Well, for me, it's like a 5-mile run or something like that. And that's like, spaced out enough, like one on the weekend and then one middle of the week where I don't feel like I am, uh, overdoing it in terms of the joints and all that kind of stuff. Because I broke my ankle like 10
Ooh.
years ago, and I have like a plate in my ankle and stuff like that I need to be mindful of. But um, but that's cool. But like I said, the incline walk too, I recommend that for people if that's, or even just walking if you're, not as far along. Like, they say walking is like akin to like as effective as like the most effective medicines out there, and strength training, the same thing. Let's see. Let me just ask you real quick, strength training, anything in particular you're doing on that front, or?
Just really boring twice a week with a personal trainer. So
Okay.
one day is like more like upper body strength, and the second day is more lower body, but very
Yep.
targeted for running, like runner strength.
Got it.
And then once a week, like this morning, I did Pilates.
Okay, cool.
Maybe I'll do Pilates or yoga
Yep.
just to get a little bit more flexibility or core strength.
Nice.
And then
Yeah, that's,
like it goes back to like the whole athlete. Like like when I say put on the hat, I literally put on the I am a runner hat. Like this is part of my identity now. Let me treat it like I'm a runner. I mean, I'm
Yep.
not like a professional athlete or a fast runner by any means, but it's been fun to embrace that lifestyle and have that be like something that brings me a lot of joy when I do it.
Mhm.
And it's just fun. It's just fun to like talk to like a friend that we just talk about running. That's like we just like, hey, what shoe do you wear? And he's like, oh, yeah.
Nice.
We like geek out on the heel drop and talk about why and what shoe that shoe is perfect for what type of run. And it's
Cool.
just fun
Yeah.
to like kind of get obsessed or passionate about something that's health related. Cause like I can't get passionate about strength training. It's just, to me, it's
Right.
just so boring. It's just like lift this weight 10 times.
Yeah, I'm pretty into the strength training right now, and
Yeah.
I do. So I'm like a big Peloton guy. People who listen to I've had like a few Peloton
Yeah.
instructors
I
on
think
this
one of the
podcast and
episodes I
stuff.
listened to was what
Ye-
was
Yeah, so I'm pretty down that rabbit hole, and I like a lot of their content. So I just finished this like Density 2 training program, which is like a 4-week thing, 3 days a week, 30-minute workouts, and you basically hit everything, but you also like track from one week to the next, like how many reps, what was your weight, and all that kind of stuff. I actually just went all in on a full set of dumbbells, 5s to 75. So I'm going like hardcore. Um, and I'm pretty into that. So I'm doing that like 3 to 4 times a week, the running a couple times a week, mixing some Peloton workouts, mixing the walking and stuff like that as well. So anyways, man, it's all good stuff. It's all good stuff.
awesome.
When's your half marathon, by the way?
I haven't signed up for one yet because I don't want to jinx myself because
Okay.
I don't want to get injured. So
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
probably sign up. Most half marathons are like late October, early November. So
Yeah. Cool.
I'll probably sign up like the week of.
Nice.
So
I want to be like what my goal is? I want to be the age group winner in the like random like
60
neighborhood
plus. Yeah.
5Ks.
Yeah.
No, like this year I'm like, cause like last year I ran a couple 5Ks with my kids, but the first one I did, it was like a Christmas time one. It was like a run in your pajamas one or whatever. And I did it, but like I did not look healthy at the end. Like
Yeah.
I ran it as hard as I could, and I was like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And I was like, cold sweat situation. I was like, are they, somebody gonna have to call paramedics? Like this year, I feel like I'm in much better shape. And I'm like, okay, what are the other 46-year-olds doing time wise here? Maybe.
So I was thinking about this, and right now, like if you follow a podcast or YouTuber that is into running,
Yeah.
they're always going to talk about a marathon because they're all in their 20s or 30s. And the marathon is like this huge challenge, 26.2 miles. That's where all the like glory is. It's like these marathons and ultra marathons.
Yep.
But I feel like as you get older, like the 5K to the half marathon should be a good sweet spot for everyone that's 40 plus. Like obviously if 40 plus you want to run a marathon, you can.
Yeah.
Like I'm really worried about getting injured. And I know that, once I get, marathon runners, they're probably doing like 50 to 80 miles a week. And that's a lot of miles. Whereas like if you're training for a 5K, you probably only need to do like, I don't know, 5 to 20 miles a week. if you're
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
seriously training for it, which is, in my mind, much easier to do from a time standpoint, less risk for injury because you're not putting on lots of mileage.
Mhm.
And it could be fun because like building your endurance for a 5K is, to me, seems like more doable for someone at our age than for a marathon. Like, so
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, I think you're much less likely for injury going down that path. I was just looking up this tweet because I don't know if you follow this guy, I think it's Dr. Alan Cousins. Have you ever come across him on Twitter?
mm-mm.
So he's like this like endurance guy, super like wonky, nerdy stuff on like running. I think he does a decent bit of running stuff. Zone 2. He's like a zone 2 like guru type guy. Anyways, so he had a tweet. I saved this one. It said sub 50-minute 10K,
Oh,
assuming average economy. I don't know what that means. Is that like weight? Assuming average economy, that's equivalent to a VO2 max of approximately 50. From a longevity perspective, that's where the good stuff starts. Okay, so I'm not there. I already said on this
dude, that's
podcast
such a good goal. Because
sub
it's not
50
easy.
minute 10K.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a 10K, like 50 minutes of pain feels much more doable than 3 hours and 3.5 hours
Right,
of pain.
right. But like he says that is equivalent to basically like a
Yeah, I feel like
50 VO2 max. Like that's if you're 50 VO2 max, okay,
if you're 50 VO2 max, you are
you
probably in the
are
like the top percentile, probably like top 1%, if I had to guess, top 10%.
top at least top quartile, if not better. Um, uh, I don't totally know if I'm looking at reading this chart the right way, but you're in the like superior category. You're like
Yeah,
4 categories away from where I said I was at the beginning
yeah,
of
yeah.
this year. Um,
Yeah, I feel like that's a good goal.
yeah,
It's a good distance for someone that wants to do it from a longevity
yeah,
standpoint and it's not like obsessed with running.
yeah.
Um,
I
which
I think I might put that on my list. I don't
I
think I
think
get.
so too. I think I might put that on my list too. Because
Yeah, I don't think I get there this year. I
no,
know I don't get there this year, but I think I might be able to do that if I like focused on that for a year. I think I might be able to do that.
oh yeah, yeah. I would.
Which would be cool because VO2 max. We haven't really talked about it in any detail, but VO2 max is like if you read all these
Yeah, why is that
ATIAs,
correlated with longevity?
it's like the highest correlation of any metric with um, mortality risk or negative correlation, I guess, with mortality risk. It's just basically it's basically the best measure you have of how cardiovascularly fit
Yeah,
you are. So
yeah.
yeah.
The one thing that I did that was super helpful so far is I hired a running coach. I
Oh,
kind of
cool.
gave her all of my inputs,
Yep.
and then I said I don't want to get injured,
Yep.
and
Yes.
I'm like I'm trying to hit the time,
If
but
I get injured, you get
yeah.
fired.
And I'm like I have a goal I want to hit, but not
Right.
getting injured is above that. So
Right.
like if
Right.
I
Right.
miss the goal but I don't get injured,
Yeah.
I'm way happier than if I hit the goal and I get injured along the way and then I
Right.
can't run. So
100%.
um,
100%. All right. We're over an hour now, so I think we'll wrap it up. This has been awesome, though. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Is there anything else you're doing or that you feel is like really worth mentioning? Whether it's anything related to health or wellness or anything that you wanted to mention. I had some stuff in there that I was thinking about asking you about mental health or alcohol or meditation or any of that stuff. But anything jump out at you?
yeah, I think the two that jump out to me is I quit drinking about 18 months ago, and that's been a life game changer. I should have done that much sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to like that Kevin Dahlstrom quote, so this separate is that as work becomes less and less of your identity, I've been embracing like a multi-faceted identity. So if you go to my website, I have these labels like I'm an entrepreneur, writer,
Mm-hmm.
content
Mm-hmm.
creator, investor, collector, runner, partner, parent. So like just having this more like multifaceted identity allows me to like tap into all types of my own personality,
Mm.
allows me to like meet so many different types of people. So then I get to curate a whole community around all of my interests, knowing that
Mm.
like not one person's going to hit all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's brought a lot of joy, and it's just made my life a lot more fun.
Mm.
And with the health stuff, it just made me healthier as well. So I'm kind of like when I say these hats, I'm just adding another hat onto like, I guess my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I can definitely see that work is like, I mean, it's probably at 20% for what I do now.
Mm.
And yeah, it's been pretty interesting to see that transition happen.
Mm. That's cool. Yeah. As someone with a lot of interests and someone who can get restless at times in different parts of his life, that appeals to me. Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out the right balance of like, you know, this podcast for me is like, it's not my day job. It's my kind of passion project on the side. It's just stuff I'm super interested in and want to talk about all the time. So trying to figure out how that balances out with the rest of everything else. And I like how you've embraced this runner identity. I think that seems to really be working for you. So that's really cool. I'll be interested to see how that evolves. You may have just answered this question, so apologies if you have. But let me just ask you my standard closing question, which is, what's one thing in life you've figured out that most others haven't?
It was going to be the identity one, but if I
Yeah.
could pick a different one, just finding like the balance or finding your middle. So I realized that like with my personality, I go to these extremes on like two different sides, and I kind of try to figure out where I want to land in the middle. I mean, this is not the best example, but like strength training or cardio,
Yeah.
that's like a terrible example. Or
What about alcohol? Because okay, so let me just tell you, man. Let me just mention this one to you because I've been off alcohol for over 2 years now. But
awesome.
I'm like starting to think about, should I reintroduce it? And I'm not like, oh, now I'm gonna be a super binge drinker for 2 years. It's more like, is the rule serving me if I can't like have a couple glasses with my wife if we're out at a nice dinner or we're on vacation or something like that? And believe me, I've produced a ton of content and everything else, and Athletic Brewing Company has sponsored this podcast. Like I've been like probably close to like a non-alcohol influencer or something like that. But I'm constantly reevaluating these things, and I'm like, should I reevaluate that? Like, what's the middle for me on that one? So I don't know. Do you like that example, or do you think that's?
Yeah, I think that's a great one. Because I think most people should land somewhere like in the middle and like embracing like moderation.
Yeah.
Whether that's like one or two drinks a week or one drink at dinner, like just knowing my personality.
Yeah.
Like it's hard for me to just have one,
Mm-hmm.
especially if I get to a certain tipping point.
Yeah.
But also like I just don't enjoy it at all anymore. I don't like being hungover and etc.
Oh,
So
yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
but yeah, I think when I'm talking about finding the middle, it's just kind of knowing. Maybe another example is like political views, right? So everyone thinks that you're either Republican or Democrat, but you're probably along that spectrum somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Because you could be very far on either end, but no one's going to be like 100% hardcore here. You might be 99. You might be in the middle. You might be in the middle between these two things, and just knowing like kind of where you kind of land, I think is like a pretty important lesson, because most things in life is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
It's never at these extremes. And I've kind of learned that lesson the hard way, because I like going to the extreme just to see what it's like. And then I find that I go all the way to the other side. And then I'm like, okay, where should I land in the middle? So for you, it might be this alcohol, you like probably drink, then you don't drink, and you're like kind of curious to know where my limit is in the middle, where I can just embrace that moderation so I could still enjoy it because I enjoy a drink, but I don't need it to go past that. And then understanding that about yourself and like kind of trying to embrace that and stick with it, I think is, just life and the challenge in life, and trying to figure that out for pretty much any example. So I've been trying to like live in the middle is kind of how I would describe it.
Yeah, like find what that right middle is for you. I feel like you kind of have exemplified that in your career, certainly in terms of like going to the extremes in terms of hard charging startup founder,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And then going to the opposite extreme, be like,
That's where I am right now. Like,
I'm going off the grid for 2 years or whatever. But like, you'll probably migrate back to some kind of a middle ground there and like
yeah.
find something that like, okay, this is what I learned from both sides of that. And I know I don't want to be on the extreme, but I like, and maybe that's just part of like maturing as a person. Maybe that's
I
what
think
we're,
that's just my personality. I think you're right. I didn't even realize that until you mentioned it. Like super hard in work, super hard in not doing anything work related. And now I'm kind of like focused on my health, but I know once that pillar gets added into my day to day and becomes part of my identity or my routine, like work is still kind of a missing bucket. So I do think within the next year, it's going to kind of come back somewhere in that middle.
Yep.
I mean, I've written a lot about building a calm business or, things along those lines. So I have an idea of what I would like for it to be like. But I have no idea what it is. And as of right now, I have zero interest in figuring that out. So I think that will kind of come back within the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Like
Cool.
after, this running season and getting this health thing kind of wrapped up.
Nice. All right, man. Well, let's leave it there. I'm going to link to, I'll link to your website and your social handles. People should go check out your stuff. You are no longer an obscure YouTube channel. You're a lot less obscure than I am now. So well done, sir. But we'll link to all that and people should go check you out. And let's do this again sometime. I think I'm sure my thoughts will continue to evolve. Your thoughts will continue to evolve. We'll experiment with different stuff. And that's the whole point of this conversation, just giving people a little window into like what we're experimenting with. So it'd be cool to do it again.
Cool, man. Well, thanks for the invite. It was great chatting through all the stuff that we're both interested in. Yeah, and thanks for putting all that content. I think a lot of the stuff you've written were things that I kind of based a lot of my own goals or habits or things that I wanted to change about myself too. So thanks for putting all that stuff out.
Cool. All right. Thanks again. Well, there you have it, folks. Michael Karnjanaprakorn, really good guy. I really enjoyed that conversation quite a bit. That was a ton of fun. Go check him out on YouTube and the socials, as the kids say. Links in the show notes on where you can find him and all that kind of stuff. I'm linking also to articles that I've written. Some of them were referenced in this conversation. Zone 2 training, body composition, heart health. I've done deep dives on pretty much all this stuff. So if you are looking for further reading material, you can find it there. Also, I'm linking to Michael's excellent article on Lp(a). That's the genetic heart metric we discussed earlier. He did a great deep dive on that topic. That's really worth your time if that's something of interest. Finally, 2 things. Go to gregcampion.substack.com and subscribe to my bi-weekly newsletter. If you miss one of these episodes, no worries. I recap everything there and share all of the links that you need, plus recommendations on podcasts and articles and books if you want to dive deeper on any of these topics. Second, if you liked this episode, please tell someone. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your friend, maybe it's on social media, maybe it's writing a review on Apple Podcasts, maybe it's all the above. I don't know. It's up to you. But this podcast survives on word of mouth. So seriously, anything you can do to help spread the message about intentional wisdom, I will be forever grateful. All right, that's it, my friend. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.